Any other, they need to have live tissue, human tissue, to grow on. So they started with the rubella vaccine, and what they did was the vaccine, the people who wanted to make a vaccine, there was a rubella outbreak going on. So they convinced women, they told pregnant women that they had been exposed to rubella and that their babies would be born horribly deformed if they went forward with the pregnancies.
Was that true? Or did they make it up?
Well, it took them 27 abortions before they found one that was infected.
God, that's disgusting.
So there were 26 babies who were aborted because their mothers were told that they would be born, their babies would be born deformed, and those babies were not infected with rubella. The 27th abortion did find a baby that was infected with the rubella virus. It's RA273 is the name of this particular, the rubella virus that's used in the MMR vaccine. And RA is rubella abortus. 27 is the number of abortions that took place. That was the 27th one aborted. And the 3 refers to the 3 tissues or 3 tissue samples that were taken from different organs in that baby. The 2 fetal cell lines that are used now, or that are continuing to be used in the vaccines that we're using right now that are licensed in the United States, are WI38 and MRC5. Now, these are from 2 abortions. WI38 was from a female baby that was aborted, and MRC5 is from a male baby that was aborted. And these abortions took place in the 1960s. Those cell lines, fetal cell lines, replicate over and over and over again. So they continue. They used to refer to them as being immortal. They're not immortal. They can only replicate for a certain number of times. The more times they replicate, the more dangerous they become, because fetal cell lines are problematic because they are highly tumorigenic, which means they are prone to cancer. So the longer they go and the older they become, the more tumorigenic they become. So the more cancer causing they become. And Paul Offit has said in media pieces about aborted fetal tissue, he says there were only 2 abortions used in the vaccines that we're using today. There are 2 fetal cell lines, MRC5 and WI38, that are involved in the MMR and the varicella vaccines that we're giving to our children, and the hepatitis A and shingles. But he's being very dishonest when he says there are only 2 abortions, because he's not talking about all the other abortions that happened before they settled on that one, on those 2. So that's one thing. The manipulation and the lying that went into coercing women to abort their babies is a separate issue. He says that they were elective abortions, and that they were not performed for the sole purpose of developing vaccines. However, the tissue has to be alive in order for the virus to be cultured on that tissue. Dead tissue is no use to vaccine makers. So if these were abortions that would have happened anyway, and they were not done for the sole purpose of developing vaccines, it's pretty coincidental that they had scientists there waiting to collect the tissue so that they could whisk it off to the lab and the tissue still be viable. That just doesn't make any sense. There's a COG for Life, which is childrenofgodforlife.org. It's a website that has a lot of information about the original vaccines, or about the original abortions that went into these vaccines. And what some of the information on that describes the abortions and the babies that were delivered. And it's reported that in about 50% of the abortions, the babies were actually alive when they were delivered, and they were then dissected immediately without any anesthesia.
In your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses have been part of that work?
My own personal work, 2.
2. So in all of your work related to vaccines throughout your whole career, you've only ever worked with 2 fetuses?
In terms of making vaccines, yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 41. Okay. Are you familiar with this article, Dr. Plotkine?
Yes.
Okay. Are you listed as an author on this article?
Yes.
Okay. This study took place at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
You were at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
How many fetuses were used in the study described in this article?
Quite a few, but my answer to the previous question was, what did I use to make vaccines?
So I'm going to ask that question again. In your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses were involved in that work?
There were only 2 fetuses involved in making vaccines. When fetal strains, fibroblast strains, were first developed, I was involved in that work trying to characterize those cells, but they were not used to make vaccines.
Wasn't the purpose of this study to help develop a human cell line or to support the use of human cell lines in the creation of vaccines?
The idea was to study the cell strains from fetuses to determine whether or not they could be used to make vaccines.
Okay. So this was related to your work?
Well, yes, in a sense,
to
yes.
vaccines, correct?
Yes. It was preparatory.
Okay. So this study involved 74 fetuses, correct?
I don't remember exactly how many.
Could you turn to page 12 of the study?
Yeah, 76.
76.
Mm-hmm.
And these fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And these were all normally developed fetuses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. These included fetuses that were aborted for social and psychiatric reasons, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
Well, I didn't personally harvest any, but a whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes.
And they were cultured?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Included the lung of the fetuses.
Yes.
Okay. Included the skin.
Yes.
Kidney.
Yes.
Spleen.
Yes.
Heart.
Yes.
Okay. And tongue.
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your entire career, and this was just one study, so I'm going to ask you again. In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally, before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Do you have any sense? I mean, this one study had 76. How many other studies did you have that you used aborted fetuses for?
Oh, I don't remember how many.
You're aware? Are you aware that one of the objections to vaccination by the plaintiff in this case is the inclusion of aborted fetal tissue in the development of vaccines and the fact that it's actually part of the ingredients of vaccines?
Yeah, I'm aware of those objections.
Okay.
The Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that which says that individuals who need the vaccine should receive the vaccines regardless of the fact, and that I think it implies that I am the individual who will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which
Do
I
you-
am
do you
glad
know-
to do.
In any event, so we have 76 in this study. Would you approximate it's been a few hundred fetuses?
Oh, no, I don't think it was that many.
Okay.
It was probably not many more than in this paper.
Uh-huh.